to another Britflix.com podcast. My name's Stuart Wright, and today's guest is author Kate Wilson. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It feels nice being called an author. That's a new thing for me. I don't think anyone's ever used that term for me before.
Well, I figured in our preamble that would be the best way to start. So we are here to talk about your debut novel, Prospects. But before we get at, and also 3 films that have impacted everything in your adult life, which I get from the book, that the book and the 3 films might flow into each other in the way that conversation might go.
Yeah, a bit.
But you're also one of the co-founders of a workplace app called Call-It. Do you want to sort of explain what that is?
Yes, I'd love to. Inspired by the terrible behaviors that we've all seen in the film business.
Yeah.
I actually think probably any industry thinks that the behavior in their industry is the worst.
Yeah.
But film, of course, is one of the most powerful cultural mediums that we have, as is television. And so it seems to me problematic that we're so poorly behaved in the industry. And I'd really love to see film and TV being renowned as the best place for people to work, because we have that powerful cultural pull and we would have the impact to make actual societal changes if we became a great place to work. So my background is also, as well as being an author and an ex-producer, I am also a lawyer, and I've always been interested in what we call HR and how we manage people.
Yeah.
And I'm really interested in the way in which we can start to value subjective experiences. So we have a tendency in HR to think about the consequences for somebody that's done something wrong, and to think about what the objective experience was. You know, is it reasonable for this person to lose their job or to go through a grievance process or to be punished in some way? And actually, it's not really about being reasonable when it comes to discrimination in the workplace. It's about the impact that you have on somebody. It's not really about the intention. And we need to start having conversations about bullying and harassment in the workplace at a much, much lower level that don't have these huge consequences to people and to the productions we work on and to the industry as a whole, which I think is really suffering a damaged reputation. So with 2 other freelancers, a producer called Jules Hussey and a television director called Della Thomas, I founded an app, which is essentially an anonymous recording and data collection tool and a signposting tool. The data collection part is as simple as can be. Every production creates a QR code. Everyone working on that production, including staff, freelancers, ancillary workers like security or cleaning or catering, scan that QR code once with their app, and they can check in every day. It's a traffic light system asking how they were treated at work today. And then it asks if there are any concerns regarding health and safety, safeguarding, working conditions, or importantly, whether or not people have none of those concerns. And then a question about whether they've experienced bullying and harassment at work that day. And if they have, whether it engage any of the protected characteristics under the Equality Act. So to keep it, really simple, it's not unlike when you're at the airport and you just whack one of those red, amber, green buttons on the way out to let the airport know the experience that you had.
Yeah.
And it's valuable for a freelancer-led industry like film and TV because it makes sure that we open up lines of communication with people that often feel that they're being silent. The other function it has is signposting. So it makes sure that everybody working on a production has access to what you might call a dignity at work policy and knows the behaviors that are acceptable and those that are unacceptable. They know how to file a grievance if something bad happens to them. They know the health and safety policy. Also, they have access to 2 people on the production with whom to start a confidential conversation, and access to third-party resources, so things like the Film and TV Charities 0800 number. Essentially, it provides a temperature check for how things are going in the workplace culture, and it provides an evidence base, and it's quantitative. So instead of relying on water cooler gossip to figure out whether or not you're creating a safe and fair place of work, you can actually measure it, and you can try to do better week by week or by year. And it's used quite widely now. It's used across film and TV. We're now in 12 languages, and we have partnerships in the Netherlands and in Germany. I'm really hoping to get into the United States soon because obviously it's helpful if I speak the language. I'm finding the Dutch quite hard to communicate with, particularly. And we're really proud of it. It's very simple, but it's powerful.
Well, no, I mean, in a previous life for me, I was an internal communication manager. So I used to run annual surveys across organizations. So the idea of like where technology's got to the point now where 100% of people have got smartphones now, and the idea you could temperature check every month and report back to a board on how people are, as opposed to the annual process of surveying people.
Well, even more, you do it every single day.
Yeah,
so people can every day. So it means that, and you can correlate how many people are going to use the resources as well. So looking at policies and that kind of thing. Of course, it's their private information, what they decide to do. But there are quite a lot of things about the app that I believe absolutely firmly. So for example, if someone experiences discrimination, they have no obligation to tell you about it.
Yeah.
And we have an obsession in this industry, in this country, with what I call speak up policies that kind of shift an obligation onto a victim of discrimination to have to file a complaint if they want to see any consequences.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the kind of, I guess, the old corporate world of whistleblowing, isn't it? This idea that the individual's going to let the lid off and the world will change. Completely.
But the fact is that a victim, say, for example, sexual harassment, because that's an area that I understand the best. And also it's an area where we've been speaking about it so much in the press. I think that we all understand it a bit more. We have more of a let on when it comes to that form of discrimination. Women are living in a world where harassment and sexual violence exist on a continuum. So they may be traveling to work on the tube, and they may experience wolf whistles or something like that on the way.
Yeah.
They'll certainly these days be confronted with posters that are directed at perpetrators of sexual harassment, saying things like "Do not stare," "Do not," upskirting is illegal. All this information is coming at them.
Yeah.
They may well get to work and be sat next to somebody who's being paid about 30% more than them to do exactly the same job as them. They're living in a world where we are still not seeing women getting through the glass ceiling when it comes to the boards of FTSE 500 companies or the bench at the bar. And in that world, it seems to me kind of ridiculous to suggest that in the 8 hours, if they're lucky, that they're at work, that suddenly they should speak up and there will be a consequence and they're going to be heard and believed and there will be respect for them and they're not going to lose their job, because the fact is they're still more likely to lose their job than the perpetrator. To my mind, obliging people to speak up about experiences is a form of victimization, and we mustn't do it. Creating that pathway so they can do it in an informed and safe way when they're ready to do it is, of course, appropriate. And I want that to happen. And I hope that we can build trust with those who experience discrimination so that they will tell us in qualitative terms what happened to them. But we mustn't oblige them to. We need to enable people to empower better leadership by anonymously communicating to their boss that there is discrimination happening in the workplace. And the boss needs to want that information because it will help them create a safer and more equitable workplace. And it will help them create better quality products, including better films and TV, and make more money.
Yeah.
So what a marvelous thing when doing the best thing for people is also the best thing for creativity, for productivity, and for profitability.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the want to do something about, the want to improve is a key factor, I think, in this. I mean, the idea that it's anonymous enables people to choose to take part or not without any fear of direct reprisal, but also the information you're gathering creates an understanding of your organization that you wouldn't have had before. So completely. And it also, I think that we have a tendency to think of workplace culture in very passive terms. So, my office is a nice place to work. My office is a shitty place to work, et cetera. Yeah.
And actually, we all have to take responsibility for building workplace culture. There should be discussions about it and accountability for it in the same way there is for a budget.
Yeah.
We all buy into the fact that we want to feel safe at work. Yes. So how are we going to contribute to the fact that we all feel safe at work? We need to start having those conversations.
One of my favorite managers I've ever had, she said to me once, "I've never left an organization, I've only left managers," which I thought was a really good way of putting it.
Yeah. Well, I don't know entirely how this relates, but I'm kind of obsessed with this new fact that I heard, which is that the principal reason for people staying in a job, and of course, retention is incredibly important when it comes to talent and people that you're working with, you've invested in. The principal reason is not salary. That is number two. We're capitalists at the end of the day. The main reason why people stay in a job is because they have a friend there. I think that's fascinating. I think it's so interesting. It shows I get very irritated when people refer to a workplace by saying we're like a family because, if it's something like my family, it means you treat each other like absolute shit and think there are going to be no consequences. So I don't think we should treat each other like family, but we should treat each other like friends.
Yes.
We should be friendly and respectful in the way that we expect our friends to be respectful towards us. And when you're friends with someone, you're friends because you acknowledge the whole person, including their foibles and their flaws and the fact that they have a whole life. They may be parents. They may have, elderly parents that they're looking after. They may have various challenges that they're facing. They may have a huge gift for playing the piano and you could benefit from that at the office party. It's looking at the whole person, acknowledging the whole person. I would really like to get there in terms of a society. Brilliant.
Well, thanks for sharing that about Call It. I will put a link in the show notes so people can check out the website and how to get involved if they want to adopt that for their productions or their company.
And I should just say it's a not-for-profit. And so if we ever make any money, which looks pretty unlikely, but if we ever did, all the funds would go back into supporting film and TV workers in the UK.
Well, let us move on to your debut novel, Prospects, which is out now. And before we get into the details of writing that, do you want to give a brief synopsis to what Prospects is about?
Sure. It is about Los Angeles, and it's about California. And it's about a feeling that people like me have had that's very, very strong, that draws us west, draws us to America and draws us to California. And there's a history in California of people being drawn west. The gold rush, which was 1849, the health seekers. So in the 1880s, when tuberculosis was rife in the United States, Southern California became a basin for doctors and health seekers, and of course, many, many quacks as well, to try to help people return to better health.
Yeah.
And then, of course, movies. And there's also Silicon Valley as well, which I don't go into too much. I reference it a couple of times in the book. But that draw is incredibly powerful. And I looked at what the commonalities are between the gold rush, the health seekers, and the movies. And I realized that they are actually very, very similar because it's all kind of about buying a lottery ticket. It's not a meritocracy. If you went and bought a piece of land during the gold rush, you would be lucky, perhaps, if the first day you found some gold, but you might be the guy right next door who's digging on his 1000th day and has found absolutely sweet FA.
Yeah.
And like the majority of people in the gold rush left California with less than they'd arrived with. And I think that happens in the movies. I think people arrive there to get their lottery ticket, to get in line, to wait to be discovered in the way that the gold was discovered. And equally with health. Some of us are fortunate and some of us are unfortunate. That lottery ticket is a dangerous thing because we start to look at the people who are unfortunate, the unlucky ones, as being somehow less worthy, less valuable, less important in society. And I think that is hugely problematic. But my relationship with California is challenging. And it's been like a torturous love affair, basically. I always wanted to live there. Both my parents are from Yorkshire, and I sound like this. So I managed to go to UCLA. I moved out to UCLA when I was 17. I lived in a little apartment by myself in Westwood, and I desperately wanted to work in the movies. That's all I wanted to do. I had this concept of what a producer was. It was probably hugely inaccurate when I moved out there.
Yeah.
But that's what I wanted to do, and the draw was unbelievably powerful. I would have gone through hell and high water to get there. And I pretty much did. And then it fell apart for me at a certain point. And so that's what the book is about. It's about that experience of desperately wanting something and believing that you would get it because you are sold the dream. When you buy a lottery ticket, you don't just buy it you are sold that lottery ticket. Yeah. So I invested everything in my lottery tickets, and I was woefully unsuccessful and came back to England with my tail between my legs. And then I returned there 5 years ago to help a friend who needed a kidney transplant. And during that process, I discovered that I had stage 4 ovarian cancer. And that reversal of fortune, I was thinking about all these people in the gold rush, the gold diggers, the movies, the health seekers, and it all kind of came together, and that's what the book is about.
Wow. So so there really is all aspects of the book are drawing on you, but you've made it a fictional story that's not about you literally, so to speak.
It's not about me literally because I wanted to have that creative freedom to really raise the stakes in the story. And I'm not really interesting enough to be.
Yeah.
So I had these elements. I had a couple of building blocks that were from my life experience, but it was important for me to fictionalize around it in order to present this character that she's pretty dislikable, the character that I've written. She's very entitled. And so maybe it is a lot.
But in a way though, that level of the entitlement when you buy the lottery ticket, as it were, even though it's like a mental transaction, isn't the same as entitled. It's like, I'm going to get it, which is a sense of I won't not, that makes the decision to stop so much harder because you've committed to it. It's a kind of grey area, isn't it? That I as a screenwriter, got one film credit, so you kind of go, okay, got that, but that doesn't end there. And it could never happen again, as much as it could happen 12 times, it's.
Look, it comes down to faith, doesn't it, really? If you don't, the work that we do in the film industry, whether it's as a director, actor, producer, director, if you do not believe that you're going to get the next job, you have no chance.
Yeah.
You have absolutely no chance of it happening. So we're constantly persuading ourselves, selling ourselves on this dream. And I wouldn't have it any other way, to be honest. I like the fact that I'm a bit of a nutcase, and there's absolutely no rationale for the decisions that I take or for the faith I have in my own capacities. And the film industry is very, very much like that. That it attracts people like that, but it can be, as a consequence, very dangerous for people because, we hear the stories of the one, we don't hear the stories of the million who are unsuccessful. And that is dangerous. And when it comes to sexual harassment in the industry, when it comes to the way in which people may be treated and exploited, when it comes to the stakes being so high, the lifestyle being just unbelievably luxurious that we're being presented with as if it is normal. The kind of Kardashian-like wealth. I think it's really quite problematic. It really does set expectations for people who are willing to make huge sacrifices to be in that arena, not recognizing that the chances of them succeeding are incredibly, incredibly slight. But unlike a lottery ticket, it's not £2.50 to play the Euro Millions. People are giving up their entire lives to be there, often their families, their loves, their children, in order to be in that environment. And I think that I was giving up a kidney just because... I had to have a bit of a reckoning after this process, because when the kidney transplant was canceled, I had to think to myself, what was I doing? And I would acknowledge that I was mostly prepared to give up a supernumerary organ in exchange for 5 weeks in LA. And I think that was my motivation. I had to ask myself, I arrived there thinking I was a bit of a hero or trying to persuade people I was. If I'm honest, if that individual, a most wonderful man called Scott Picard, if he had called me and asked for my kidney but said he was living in Detroit suburbs at the time, I'm not sure I would have been so up.
Oh, my goodness.
I am just being honest.
No, I understand. But so when you're writing this book and you're drawing on your experiences and observations and sort of wider views of perceptions of the industry. And you said there about fictionalizing it enables you to heighten it and heighten the stakes and stuff to make it more dramatic. What for you were the biggest challenges? Because I'm working with a writer who I'm adapting a novel, and in that book he said, he'd done everything in it is more or less truthful, but you can't. One of the things he says is you can't sue me for what I write in fiction, and if I write it in so was there any liberation in terms of what you're able to say with prospects that you maybe wouldn't have been able to say in a memoir?
Yeah, huge liberation. I do have thoughts about this idea of truth that we've all been talking in relation to Baby Reindeer. So Baby Reindeer, which, have you seen it?
Yes.
So, the opening gambit is, this is a true story.
Mm-hmm.
None of the caveats that we normally see. This is based on a true story, and then all the small print coming off the other side. And it really bothered me from the very, very beginning. I couldn't quite figure it out. I found myself really having a kind of distaste for Richard Gadd that didn't have any evidence base within the substance of the show. It was just this is a true story thing that really...
Take it or leave it. It's a true story.
Well, no, I think the problem with it is that it comes down to privilege.
Mm-hmm.
It comes down to privilege. There is no such thing as truth. There isn't. There is no objective truth. And I definitely don't think that Baby Reindeer is an objective truth. I think it's his perspective on things that happened. And I have no doubt that that perspective evolved during the many ways in which this story and this experience that he had was narrated. So it began as an Edinburgh show, and it went into various forms before it became however many parts of a Netflix series. And there's no human being who is not adapting their narrative in order to make sense of the very confusing world in which we live. Certainly, more so if you are a human being who's a performer, then you're absolutely adjusting your story in the moment as you perform it, as you share it with people, because you're there for an audience. The audience has an influence. So it's a little bit kind of, that great, the medium is the message type of thing. This process that he's been through over the many years of telling this story, he's convinced himself that it is a true story, but it is not. There is no objective truth. And I think he irritated me by saying it, because back to the work that I do with the app and in discrimination, when women particularly have an experience of sexual harassment and they make an allegation, the first thing that happens is that they are denied. They're told that did not happen to them, that they misunderstood, that they've overreacted. So people who are experiencing discrimination live in a world where they could never say, this is the truth. Women tend to particularly, and I keep on bringing it back to women, I do acknowledge that men experience sexual harassment. Certainly men are 98% of the perpetrators, women about 76% of the victims. But women tend to begin conversations about sexual harassment. The impact that your behavior had on me, maybe I'm being oversensitive, but the way that I felt about it, we're always, always forced into a corner where we have to justify the experience that we've had. And so I think we have to be very careful about that word truth. And I wouldn't pretend that I have access to an objective truth. Legally, yes, if you write a memoir, you can't be challenged on it legally because you are able to say, this is the truth that I experienced. There are laws now. We've had the same... We've had another film. It's The Lost King, the Steve Coogan film, Baby Cow's production.
Okay.
Which was about the discovery of Richard III's body in the car park in Leicester.
Yeah.
And one of the characters within there is based on a professor in real life, and he's now suing Baby Cow because he feels that it was a great representation. So that's kind of fascinating. I'll be interested to see what happens with that. But certainly for me, I wanted the freedom of writing a fictional novel because there are things that I wanted to insert into it. Also because there are some characters therein who are sort of what I would call composite characters.
Yeah.
But also because I've taken not only my own experiences, but experiences of women that I've met or that I've read about or that I've heard about when it comes to the poor practices and particularly sexual harassment within the film industry.
Yeah.
And the character, a couple of times you do hear her name, but the character throughout the book is just the pronoun she.
Yeah.
And that is to communicate that it is, unfortunately, the experience of many, many, many women.
Yeah.
So that was important for me. Also, as much as I am like a complete professional failure, and that part of the book is absolutely true, I did move back to England and met my now ex-husband, but I was with him for 22 years. I have 2 children, a 17-year-old daughter and a 20-year-old daughter, possibly my only successes in life. And I'm very proud of them. And I didn't I thought it was important that this character actually doesn't have that level of satisfaction in her life in terms of, I'm able to say, well, maybe everything happens for a reason. Maybe I came back here for a reason. I met my ex-husband, Ian. I have my 2 children. I can make sense of this world that we live in and the choices that I made. The character in the book doesn't have that happen to her. And so she's unable to make sense of things. She has no children. And so getting things like ovarian cancer at a young age, obviously you're unable to have children because you have to have, extensive surgery.
Yeah, of course.
So those kind of stakes are raised. And also that kind of liberty. I mean, really, I was able to just make her much more interesting than I was ever going to be.
Thinking about the book and what you wrote in The Guardian recently, I was interested in the timing, and you talked about you didn't have the language and there was not who to speak to. But I was thinking, like, in 2000, I mean, I didn't see the film till after the event. So in 2000, there was a film called Ivan's XTC, which is I don't know if you ever saw it, Bernard Rose's film with Danny Houston.
Yeah, I did see it a long time ago.
Yeah, but I mean, it's only the fact that it's a shocking film because it portrays a lot of what blew up in the sort of what we call the Me Too period. What you describe in the article, and yet when the film came out, it was just, there was no kind of like, oh my God, Hollywood's in trouble and it should sort its act out. And equally, I think 94 Swim with Sharks comes out, which is a horrendous portrayal of a toxic relationship. Yeah. And it was almost, both films are almost like there's a heroism to what's going on like that. I mean, the man's literally dying of cancer in Ivan's XTC. What's your, I mean, I don't know how much you get, I've not read all your book, but, in terms of why are we not moved? Why is progress so hard when we can point to what's wrong so clearly?
So frustrating. It is so frustrating. So the reason why, even though the legal framework was in place when I was living in Los Angeles, culturally there was no language or way to discuss sexual harassment, is because of a few things. One is that without social media, women are isolated in these experiences.
Yeah.
And so I think the advent of social media and the way in which we're able to communicate with one another and acknowledge shared experiences, which is also why the book is written in that third person she, is about that shared experience, is hugely important. There is power in numbers. There's no two ways about it.
Yeah.
And there are a couple of things that were going on while I was in university and afterwards. One is the Clarence Thomas situation. So who's obviously a member of the Supreme Court now.
Yeah.
But Anita Hill accused him of sexual harassment. He was sexually harassing her in all the obvious ways, trying to get her to go out with him and trying to get her to watch porn and things. And watching that process, those hearings, and watching Anita Hill not believed, and observing now, if you want to really feel hopeless about the state of the world, and if you want to understand what I mean when I say the continuum of sexual violence in terms of the experience of women in our country, just read Clarence Thomas's opinion on Roe v. Wade being turned over. So these things are all connected, right? All connected, in my opinion. So that was going on in the background of my college experience. Also, there was a film about sexual harassment. It's called Disclosure, I think. It's with Demi Moore. And she sexually harasses.
That's right. Yeah, Michael Douglas.
Michael Douglas, yes. She sexually harasses Michael Douglas. And then blackmails him. So what this did culturally, and this is why film is such a powerful medium, is it said to us, no, all these sexual harassment laws are just so that women can blackmail men, and women as sexual predators that are going to force men to have sex with them and then blackmail them so that they can get promoted. So these are very, very powerful things for a young woman that are around them. And so absolutely at that time. And don't forget also, I was working in tiny, tiny companies. My first company was part of Hologram Films and Entertainment, but the second company I worked for was an independent production company. I think there were 2 people that actually worked for it. So there were no HR policies. Who are you going to talk to really seriously? It just did not exist as a thing to do. And it's very confusing if you experience sexual harassment. To start with, often these are men in a position of power and feel at first flattered. It can be flattering. You can feel complicit. You feel blamed. You feel like perhaps you caused this problem for yourself. You feel very confused about exactly what's happened. And if you don't have the language, then it doesn't really exist.
Yeah. And looking for acceptance is not the same as looking for a partner, is it? But it can feel like you're being accepted, can't it, I suppose?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You can feel that you're kind of running with the in crowd and, we all have egos, and you might feel that you've been picked because, again, it's a lottery ticket, right? So you feel like you feel like maybe you've won the lottery ticket if someone selected you. You've been discovered. You've been seen. You don't know if you're one of 10, 20, 30 people that are being discovered and seen, because there wasn't that social media. There wasn't, there were no hashtags. There wasn't an ability to say, me too, I'm experiencing this. Oh, wait a minute. We have this collective power between us, and we have this collective experience as women.
Right then. One last question about prospects, if I can. In terms of your perceptions going into writing the book and having written the book, what do you think are some of the biggest changes in your mind that you made in terms of what you're able to find out, either about yourself thinking about it or new things you found out while doing the research, trying to get the book written?
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I think I did learn quite a bit about myself. I think it was a hugely cathartic experience. I loved writing it. And actually, the book is about...
This message comes from our sponsor, Teladoc Health. There are lots of reasons for wanting to be healthy. Family, work, living a fuller life. Teladoc Health understands. Whether you have diabetes, high blood pressure, or just need to manage your weight, Teladoc Health can help. Visit teladochealth.com/what'syourwhy for more information. That's TELADOC health/what'syourwhy.
People needing to take responsibility for themselves and value themselves and not be so subjected to this notion of having to be seen or having to be discovered in order to have value. Yet, the reason why I'm a, middle-aged woman writing my first book is because I didn't feel that I had the right to be a creative person in that way. I've always wanted to be a writer, but sort of in a secret way. I did not have the confidence, I don't think, to be a writer. So I've always written a lot in terms of, I've got an MA in English. I went to law school. I write all the presentations that I do. So I do a lot of writing. I know that I can string a sentence, and I know all the rules, et cetera, et cetera. But the idea of being a creative writer is a completely different level of privilege that I did not feel that I had access to.
Yeah.
And so even just the process of writing the book was me breaking through that particular barrier for me. And I now am very clear with my children, they must do the thing that they love in the world. Like I genuinely believe that creative expression is the thing that separates human beings from the rest of the animal kingdom. And I think it's one of the most important things that we do in our life, because I think it is the way that we look after our mental health. I think it's the way that we understand ourselves better. I think there's the old, bit of a cliche, but expression being the opposite of depression. And it's kind of a silly thing to say, but I actually really, really do believe that. I believe that process of talking about your experiences, reconciling yourself to your failures, acknowledging your successes, that expression of who we are is hugely, hugely important. So just the process of of writing the book, forget even about the substance of it, which was so personal and important to me. The process of it was a really healthy thing for me to be doing. And I think a big part of my self-acceptance and maturing and recognizing that it was okay to use my own voice and to develop my own voice.
Yeah.
And if you read the book, it really is my own voice. I previously have, I think, tried to write like other people, which of course is a big mistake. You'll never be successful when you do that. And I went on a kind of writing retreat, and one of the tutors said to me, when I told her I had this idea for a book, she said, just start it today. Just write the first few lines or pages or what the word is or anything else. And I hit on the title prospects pretty quickly, because of course that represents your prospects in terms of your health, prospectors in terms of the gold rush. The Hollywood Boulevard was originally called Prospect Boulevard. All kind of came together. And I thought, wow, these ideas and the sort of synapses started bubbling away. And I wrote the opening bit of the book on that retreat. And it hasn't changed very much at all, that bit. It really, it's like kicking off when you're about to do laps, and it really did set me off. And I wrote it pretty quickly. I was working full time, so I wrote it, kind of mornings between about 5 and 7 a.m. And it was a hugely positive experience for me. I can't wait to write another book. I say that, but I spend most of my free time watching bad reality TV, so I really should actually just write another book.
I mean, just to give you some, I remember listening to an interview with Abby Morgan talking about her writing habit, and she basically described it as being avoiding going down a YouTube rabbit hole. Was how she got to write. It was like everything but right, but then that was the challenge. And I think it was Michael Arnott who did Little Miss Sunshine and Toy Story 3 and stuff. He talks about procrastinating until he hates himself every morning. Yeah. So I think it's part of the. I mean, I'm not. I totally agree with you about the express thing. I mean, I was in my late 30s when I even thought I went to a night school class on how to write screenplays. I wasn't someone. I didn't go to film school. I have no. The fact that I was the internal communication manager when I started my journey, and and now have writing habits like writing short stories every day that are just for me and nothing else, just to deal with what's going on in your head, because it's an easy way, not an easy. It's easy way for me. I'm not saying it would be for everybody else, but yeah, I think you're right. I think that's an interesting part, because it's not. I wasn't expecting that the answer, because I was thinking more it'd be more projected on the book, but the idea that the book itself is what's changed. Having done the book is what's changed you, as it were.
I always say that every great film has an element that is about filmmaking. Not directly. I'm not saying that they show like a camera or a film set, but I'm saying great films have a part of it that has a subtext that's about creative expression, about that process of making film, about collaboration. I mean, really greatest films, I think, are like that. So, I'm trying to think of an example, but I just saw La Chimera a couple of times, and that's about the archaeologist and digging out the past. That is what filmmaking does. It unearths the story. It manifests the dream that you've had. It takes it back to reality. It manifests the ghosts that you've been haunted by, brings them to reality. So that's, I think, a brilliant film. And I think it's absolutely about filmmaking, because I think true filmmakers are always talking about filmmaking. For me, the book was about writing a book.
Yeah.
That's the kind of happy ending, is that if you recognize that a part of that character is the author, then the fact that that character found a voice and wrote a book gives it a happy ending, even if there isn't one in the book.
Well, congratulations for writing your debut novel, Prospects. It's out now on Cinnamon Press, is that right?
Yeah, it's published by Cinnamon Press, and it's available in bookstores, Amazon, all those kind of terrible platforms. I'll
put a link to the prospectsnovel.com, and people can find it when they go to the show notes. Moving swiftly along then, to 3 films that have impacted everything in your adult life. I have 3 films that you've given me. I'll do them in the order that you supplied them. I don't watch the films because it's more, because what this is about the memory of the film, about why it's fond to you, and not and like it's not about. We can talk about what happens in the film, as much as you want, but it's about what it sparks in you, what it means to you. You can hear that at your end, okay?
Oh yeah, I can hear that.
So when the 5-minute alarm goes off, that's our nod to stop talking about that film. I mean, obviously, you can finish your thought by all means. It's more the fact that it gives us the idea of we'll capture the energy of each film in 5 minutes, rather than, I'm sure you could talk about each film for 15 minutes or more if room was allowed.
I definitely could. I'll stick to 5 minutes.
So does that all seem fine to you, what we're about to do?
Perfect.
Brilliant. Okay, 5 minutes of counting, and we're going to start with 1976's Bugsy Malone, directed by Alan Parker. Do you want to tell us about how you discovered this film? Why? What's the fond memory from it?
So I was born in the UK, and I think we were one of the first people in our street to have a VCR.
Mm-hmm.
And I was born in 1976, and I feel like I was born into Bugsy Malone. I'm obsessed with this film. I mean, I don't know if you remember, it was on TV a lot. It was like a Christmas movie.
I'm born in 1971, so yeah.
So we saw it when we were kids. It was every Christmas, every Easter weekend, all the long weekends, it would be on TV. And for me, it really represents something huge, which is it represents the whole idea of filmmaking. You can really tell that most of it's made on a soundstage. There are those few scenes that are outside that country house. They're, driving the cars around. But it was filmed mostly at Pinewood. It's one of the first films that I saw where I started to break down, oh, wait, that was made here, but it's a fantasy of America. Wait, is it New York? Where is it? Is that an English actor doing an American accent? And recognizing that this was a constructed piece. And of course, it's all children. I mean, it's the most bizarre film you've ever seen. It's deeply uncomfortable to watch now. And I do wonder.
Average age of the cast was 12.
Yeah. So Foster was 12. It was made the same year that she made Taxi Driver. She came directly from Taxi Driver.
Mind blowing.
To UK to make Bugsy Malone. I mean, what a year. But these are deeply bizarre performances that a 12-year-old was asked that 12-year-olds were asked to give. And it is kind of worrying. They're wearing very adult clothes. Essentially, Jodie Foster's playing another prostitute. It's all very kind of adult and odd and slightly disturbing, but I completely 100% love it. I'm so glad it exists. It makes me deliriously happy. I saw Dexter Fletcher at the cinema about a week ago, and I still love him for being Babyface, such a wonderful character at the beginning of his career. I think it's an extraordinarily good film, and I think it is about something that my book is about that we just discussed, and something that I've been fascinated by, which is the world's concept of what America is like. So this kind of gangster movie, this kind of Chicago gangster film is very, very British in its perception of what that might be.
Yeah.
Which is really fascinating. And, its perception of sort of sexual politics or class, how class might exist in America. I think it's an extraordinary film. I'm sort of glad that it has no comps, so to speak, because it does just stand alone as a really odd bit of filmmaking. The music is phenomenal. Right? I mean, music is absolutely brilliant. Of course, it's not the voices of the kids. So that is another slightly odd thing, is that once they start singing and giving their performances, it's adult voices that are emerging from these tiny children's bodies. It began a hugely long and continuing love affair with Jodie Foster, and a brief but powerful love affair with Scott Baio. That didn't persist all the way through Charles in Charge or anything, but I did absolutely love the cast. And it definitely, if there is a film that inspired me to be part of the film industry, that was it. I must have watched it 100 times when I was a kid, and I watch it at least once a year now. And one of the great joys in my life has been forcing my children to watch it with me. And introducing it to Americans who often haven't seen it, oddly.
Really?
It didn't get action. No. I've been surprised by real cinephiles who were unaware of the film, who love, for example, Alan Parker's other work like Midnight Express or and unaware of this kind of odd thing that came out of the mind of that.
I suppose it's like Robert Duvall doing Popeye, isn't it? And sorry, Robert Altman doing Popeye. It's like that such an outlier in terms of their directorial career.
Yeah, completely. It is such a fun movie, though. There's something about it. It brings absolute joy to my heart when I hear the music and when I think about those characters and I think about them all being at Pinewood making it. I really, really love the film.
I don't know whether, it's interesting that you can see it as problematic because obviously it's 12-year-olds playing adults, and my name is Tallulah, my first rule is fun is not exactly subtle, is it? But and the fact that I can quote that at you and I've not seen the film for years tells you how ingrained it is. Oh, there's the 5 minutes. I'll just finish that thought. I was just, but I can be 10 years of age, 11 years of age the minute I start watching it because of the children, the pedal cars, and the custard pie guns and stuff. There was a belief that this, suspending your disbelief wasn't that hard. It was like, this is what happens when kids take over. This is all it was to my mind.
Completely. I mean, I'm kind of obsessed with that concept of the suspension of disbelief. It's one of the ideas in the book that I've written is I do wonder if in Los Angeles, everyone's spending so much time in the cinema that their disbelief is suspended permanently.
La La Land, literally.
Yeah, La La Land. You leave the cinema and it doesn't quite lift. It's sort of you still believe that you're living in the movies and that there's going to be a happy ending and that everything's going to be tied together in the third act. Of course, that's not, unfortunately, how life actually happens.
No, indeed. Scripts make sense. Real life rarely does. Your second choice, jumping to 1985, is Bob Zemeckis' Back to the Future, which I'm led to believe was rejected 44 times before the script was bought or greenlit.
Really?
Yes.
That's fascinating because it is obviously a work of genius.
Yes, indeed.
There are several reasons why I've chosen this film specifically. And then there are additional reasons why I think it's representative of the kind of school of film that are so powerful. So the specific reasons are that right before I went to university in Los Angeles, I visited, and my friend's mum was a script supervisor on Tales from the Crypt. And I went and I met Bob Zemeckis. And it was a big deal. It was the first time I'd really properly, I'd been to the set of Biggles that filmed here because I think my dad did the insurance for it or something.
Okay.
When I was a child. But it was the first time I'd really been on it was on a studio lot and they were shooting it. And I met Bob Zemeckis and I watched what a script supervisor does. And I got a sense of that energy and that slightly terrifying feeling you get when you're in a film set that you're about to fuck something up. That is, a moment of brilliance that will never be captured again because you sneezed or something. But it was brilliant to meet him. And again, this is about the building blocks of me starting to understand how films are made and really getting a sense of the fact that these are normal people, that Bob Zemeckis is just a normal person. And maybe this was something that I really could do. The other thing about Back to the Future is unusually for me because I cannot stand things like roller coasters or the kind of theme park stuff. One of my favorite places on earth is Universal Studios. I think it's so brilliant. I mean, I love the tram ride mostly, but one of the other great rides is the Back to the Future ride, which still exists. So it's been there for years and years and years and years, and it's really persisted. And essentially, we thought, it's genius. It's just you sit in a car and it shakes around, and then there's just a screen in front of you, and the car is just tipping a tiny bit, but you're convinced that you're in the DeLorean, going down.
I've done the Simpsons one. I did the Simpsons. Is a similar ride.
Maybe Back to the Future doesn't exist anymore, but I love Universal Studios. I'm thinking when I die, a few of my ashes were scattered there. Because that tram ride, the absolutely ridiculous plunky shark coming at you as the tram tips and the flooding and the...
Do you remember where you saw Back to the Future first time? This wasn't a VHS experience, was it, I guess?
So this will have been a VHS experience. I think I will have unlikely to have seen it in the cinema.
Okay.
I think cinemas were expensive and pretty rare when I was young. I probably went more than most people, but still it was a rare thing to do. But when I was 9, I moved to Bermuda.
Mm-hmm.
And Bermuda had, at that point, absolutely ridiculous television. So there was one channel and it didn't start until halfway through the day. And essentially it had The Price is Right, a half hour of US news, a half hour of local news, which was made for quite brilliant, hilarious viewing, a soap opera called The Young and the Restless, and then sort of evening shows that were kind of the cheapest thing that Bermuda Television could buy. Everyone I knew had these huge satellite dishes on the side of their houses so they could get satellite television. My parents refused to do that, so we had nothing to watch. We did have an absolutely brilliant video store called Phase One, and we'd go there and take literally dozens of movies home at a time and just watch them over and over and over again. And so these kind of 80s movies that were coming out then have a huge resonance for me because I didn't watch them once in the cinema in the way that I might now watch a movie that comes out. I watched them 4 times over a weekend. 2 weeks later, re-rented them and watched them 4 times and watched them over and over. Absolutely loved them. So for me, in terms of what this is emblematic of when it comes to this movie is, I'm going to quote in a nod to one of my favorite people, Carl Needham, who's the founder of IMDb. I think this quote comes from the film Ordinary People, and it is, all of life's questions are answered in the movies, which I think is a great film quote. And I think it's true. And I think that Back to the Future represents, when you talk to people about the potential of time travel, they are not going to quote Carlo Rovelli or Ronald Mallet or one of the great theoretical physicists that have actually looked into how black holes work and whether or not there's time travel. They will be thinking about the DeLorean and Marty McFly. It's become, we talk about language. I recently, if you could go back and change the experience we had in Hollywood, would you? And my response was, wait a minute, are we talking about Back to the Future rules of time travel? What are the so I do think that we mustn't underestimate that films like Back to the Future, they have so much power over how we perceive the world. And we genuinely, even though the science in there, is obviously a whole load of BS and has been completely proven to not make any sense whatsoever, it is how we perceive the concept of time travel. And it really doesn't matter, even if I understood what the hell Carlo Rovelli is talking about when he talks about wormholes, I would still be referencing Back to the Future when it came to whether or not I was interested in time travel.
Yeah, you've got Back to the Future as the time travel model, and you've got Groundhog Day as the, if I could just repeat one day, what would I do? And it's weird to think it's two movies that set the rules. A bit like, in a way, what's he called? George Romero's Night of the Living Dead set the rules for zombies. Like, it wasn't like there was rules before, and yet it becomes the rule of how a zombie film is made, and yet it was just a film. Did you know that DeLorean actually wrote to Zemeckis after the film and thanked him for immortalizing the car in the movie, and also sold kits so you could make the car look like the time traveler?
That is brilliant. Brilliant. I love it.
Moving swiftly along to your third choice and jumping just 3 years to 1988 for Jonathan Kaplan's award-winning The Accused, and the second film to feature Jodie Foster. But tonally, we're shifting somewhat from the first two.
We're shifting a lot. But this really comes back to a question that you asked me a few moments ago, which is, why haven't things progressed when it comes to experiences of sexual harassment, of sexual assault, sexual violence? In this case, it was a gang rape. And it is really shocking to think that this film was released in 1988. And here we are in 2024, 36 years later. And I don't think we've made any progress, unfortunately, particularly when it comes to the legal system. So this film is based on a true story. It's based on the gang rape of a young woman and her court case. It generated a huge amount of publicity. It was filmed and aired on television, the court case, and it raised all those questions about victim blaming. I mean, this is a woman who was told that she, typical, what was she wearing? Did she ask the cocktails that she had, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I do find it mind-blowing, depressing, anxiety-inducing, exasperating that we live in a world today in the UK where if you are brave enough to report a rape to the police, you have a 1.6% chance of the CPS taking it to court. 1.6%.
Blimey.
The chances of you being successful, i.e. of the perpetrator being convicted of rape, are infinitesimally small. And I believe that the vast majority of rapes are not reported to the police. So we're looking at a world where there is no criminal accountability for the rape of women and of men. Our legal system is completely letting down women. This sends a message in terms of whether or not women can expect to be paid fairly, whether or not women can expect to be wolf whistled on the street, whether or not women can expect to be sexually harassed at work. And that's that continuum of sexual violence that I've mentioned before. And I feel so strongly about the fact that we have to change this. I have 2 daughters. I hate to think that they're growing up in a world where my generation, the generation before me, failed to improve the criminal system to protect women better when they have these experiences, and men, of course, that experience rape. I think it's an absolutely brilliant performance from Jodie Foster. I should acknowledge that I did work for Jodie Foster. That's and when she asked me why I wanted to work there, I told her it's because of Bugsy Malone, but I really should have said it was because of the accused. I think that her performance in it is absolutely remarkably good and nuanced and honest. And back to that word that I don't really like, truthful, but it does come from such an emotional place of truth. I just hugely regret the fact that although it opened up a massive discussion, our society seems completely married to retaining the privilege that is experienced by white men. I would say, as a comparison to a film like The Accused, when the Black Lives Matter movement happened, there were a lot of clips of discussions from the 50s, 60s, 70s, from the civil rights movement and beyond about, for example, Marlon Brando talking about racism. We don't seem to be making the progress that we can or should be making, seeing the repetition of the same discrimination that people are experiencing, whatever that type of discrimination is incredibly frustrating. And I think that it is something that we have to start being accountable for as a society. Because we now have an evidence base that diversity of thought, so making sure there is inclusivity, that people can share their experiences and share their perspective on things, leads to a happier, healthier, more successful society. So a lot of the things that we see happening, the extremism, look at the politics in the United States, look at the politics in France, who scraped through when it comes to that election, look at the experiences that we've had here in the UK. I think a big part of this is that we have failed as a society to have a more equitable approach to leadership, to making sure that we have more voices in the room, particularly when it comes to women. I look at the fact that we are still going to war. I honestly don't think we would be if there were more women in charge. I genuinely think.
I feel like it's, and we saw it a lot with what the Tories did and the way that Trump speaks, is that there's a lot of sentiment within what we call the patriarchy, to be in charge. Let me just turn that off. To be in charge or to rule, as opposed to what you really are given permission for is to govern, which is to work with everybody, and working with everyone means that in Britain there are 70 million people, all with, while there are clumps of people that are similar, everybody's individual as well, so deserves to have an experience just like everybody else has. And I do think that, and you look at, we're recording this on the 18th of July, and you look at what Vance is saying, it sounds like he's reading straight from Handmaid's Tale, not from the 21st century. And so,
completely.
I don't know. Hopefully, it's it's like the last grasp of the nails at something they think they're losing, and they're going to lose it, rather than a reversal of something that was, been slow but has been some progress in comparison.
Yeah. I think, I used to believe in evolution, and I'm starting to think that revolution might be what's required.
Yeah.
Because we really are failing young people, and I think they're woefully unimpressed by us as a generation. It's the way in which we're leaving them the world, which is such a complete mess. And so my hope is in them, in the next generation, that they can make some changes. But my fear is that with the last gasps of breath of the Donald Trumps and the J.D. Vances and so many other politicians in this country, we've still got worse that we'll see.
Yeah, there's the fact that we talk about, you see headlines like, "Oh, it's nice to have grown-ups in charge in Britain." It's like, why did is that? That's the least you should expect, is that grown-ups are in charge of governing the country. But that's what happened when people like the Cambridge Analytica thing, where they realised they could just flout the rules because the rules didn't catch up with them until what they wanted to happen had already happened. So you can't put the genie back in the bottle. Whereas
Yeah.
Most politics is basically just a gentleman's agreement from about 1850. And that's it. You know, you're not meant to do that. I mean, the fact that you can't call someone a liar, and that's the biggest thing that they'll get upset about in the Houses of Parliament, which is, you know, levels of insane I can't get my head around.
I mean, the kind of the theater of Parliament, it's kind of fascinating. I mean, I'm a member of the bar, and it's similar. There's kind of a similar theater that exists there, which is interesting, but does exist so that it is inaccessible to people that are not kind of invited into the clique, so to speak. So I'm a member of Gray's Inn, and when you become a barrister, you have to have a dozen dinners there, formal dinners over the course of your year when you're called to the bar. And you sit in a mess of 4 people, and the most senior person on that mess is able to speak to the least senior person on the next table to go up to the head. So if you need to, for example, to be excused to use the toilet, you have to ask the most senior person on your table to ask the least senior person on the next table to ask the most. That's how it's supposed to work. And I was called to the bar when I had a brand new baby. And I remember thinking, I'm not sitting through this dinner with an episiotomy and asking for permission to use the toilet. It is, but the theater of it, I do quite like. There is something that's interesting, and the tradition and the theater. But I think we have to remember that a lot of the jargon, a lot of those conventions and rules are about exclusivity.
Yes.
And they're about privilege. Who's going to let you into the fold? Who's going to let you know? I think the same goes with a lot of the jargon around filmmaking.
Yeah, exactly.
It also goes for jargon around, for example, the finance sector.
I mean, I started a podcast just because I could speak to filmmakers and learn the lingo, as it were, for want of a better expression, because I was coming at it so late in life. I had no practical experience. I'd been a journalist. I'd interviewed lots of filmmakers, but that's not the same as suddenly wanting to interview filmmakers almost like as a learning tool, which is a different thing. And I created a podcast which gave me the privilege to do that. But a lot of what I've realized over 10 years of doing it is just I've gained the confidence to be able to talk to other people in film.
Well, completely. But the thing about film is, another great film quote is, nobody knows anything.
Indeed, they don't.
But as a consequence, that sort of defensive attitude that people take because they're essentially faking it till they make it, everybody is.
Yeah.
It's, the emperor's new clothes is really hard to penetrate. It makes people feel as if they're making mistakes all the time. And of course, they're not. There are different ways to do things. There are different ways to make films. There's a huge amount of change that we could be benefiting from because of the digital revolution and the way in which we can use tech, which filmmakers are, resisting unbelievably. It's fascinating. It is fascinating that use of jargon to exclude people.
Well, look, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts about your writing your book, your debut novel Prospects, which is out now through Cinnamon Press. And thank you for sharing 3 films that have impacted everything in your adult life, and for introducing certainly me and hopefully some of the audience to your app, Call It. And like I say, I'll put links in the show notes to all those details. So thank you
so much. I've really enjoyed talking to you. Thank you so much.